I was reading this thing here on the on your Wikipedia page. I don't where you started working off, because that's kind of like where I had met you when you were working with the music blog Ambi.
Yes, that's how everything started, and then I started going from interviewing just musicians to interviewing wrestlers, and then people started noticing, promoters, that the wrestlers really liked shooting the breeze with me, and then they started bringing me on to do backstage stuff.
Okay, and then the first big break was with who? With Impact?
Impact brought me on for about 8 months, then AEW brought me on for 2 pay-per-views, and now I'm with MLW.
Right, because I see some of these groups here. I've heard none of them, which lets you know how old I am. It says, okay, please tell me, are these Canadian groups or who are they? Palais Royale, Steel Panther, Bring Me the
Steel
Horizon.
Panther's a good cover band.
Yeah.
Steel Panther's a good cover band. They used to play in Atlanta at Charlie Magruder's, and they play in Vegas a lot too.
Yeah, they're huge now. But no, from my side, I've interviewed like Metallica, Yoko Ono. I've interviewed a bunch of 80s bands. I have no idea why on my wiki a bunch of like indie groups I love are listed. Like those are ones that are close to my heart. I have no idea who wrote my Wikipedia.
Right. So these are these are basically indie bands, right?
I mean, a lot of them are. Steel Panther are doing great. Like they sell out like 2,000-3,000 people for their shows, but they're definitely not. They're definitely not the radio bands, you know.
Right. I see Greta Van Fleet on here, and they're pretty popular as well.
Yeah, they're doing really well now.
I thought Greta Van Fleet was a girl that went off on Trump. That was mad. What was that girl's name?
Greta. Oh man, I can't remember her name. Yeah.
Greta Thunberg.
Yeah.
Greta Thunberg. I heard Greta Van Fleet. Mark Madden speaks highly of Greta Van Fleet. They're a hot band.
They're very Led Zeppelin-esque to the point where people call them like copycats and stuff.
You know who I saw that I didn't even know who this was, but she had a really cool look, and you probably know who she is, Alicia. Did you see NXT? This girl Poppy came out.
Yeah, she for a while did these very obscure videos on YouTube for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden her video started to go viral because it was just so bizarre. Like she really has a crazy image. Her songs are wacky, and then she started going viral for everything. And she's one of the most well-known artists to have come out of YouTube. So
she looks like she's 12. Was she in makeup or something that made her look weird? Because I was reading that she had a very dark videos and people really into it, and then all of a sudden she was like this Japanese anime thing.
I really don't know much of her history. All I know is she broke out from YouTube, and I agree with you. I remember seeing her for the first time thinking, you look so young, but she's trying to do all of these very, adult-like things, and the juxtaposition of that always threw me for a loop, but I don't know how old she actually is.
Did you see what she was wearing for the NXT thing?
No, I didn't catch it.
Oh, it was very cool. It looked like she was in some space suit. It was it was really cool.
I got a couple questions.
Yeah.
Oh, let's do it.
All right. So you're kind of in how old are you?
24.
24, I saw that.
She already said that. Okay.
Okay.
This guy reads, just so you know, he reads while you
no.
Yeah, while you're talking.
Let me tell you exactly what happened here, because I wanted to get a raw answer. Alicia, when I heard you were coming on, I didn't know a lot about you. I'd seen you in interviewing a couple YouTube clips. So I was actually I was clicking on Wikipedia, to just Google your name to search you to find out more about you. But I didn't want to know anything. So I just quit, because I wanted to just ask you, because Konnan speaks highly of you. I want to ask you some basic questions. I didn't want to have any bias before I went into it. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So, all right. So you're 24 years old, all right, and you started So your interests. When did you gain an interest in rock, and when did your interest in professional wrestling? When did you develop those?
Both music and wrestling have been in my life since I was a child. My parents would bathe me when I was a baby to everything from Motown to Prince to Duran Duran. And my dad's been a wrestling fan since he was a kid, because he would watch it with his dad. So I was about 2 or 3 when I first started watching wrestling. The first match I remember was Hell in a Cell, the triumphant Foley Undertaker match. So I think that came out 21 years ago. So yeah, that timeline makes sense.
Okay, so you became a fan of professional wrestling. Now, what type of fan were you? Have you watched it since, or were there periods of time where you were interested in watching shows because it was hot, and then maybe the shows weren't that good and you quit watching, or have you been a religious wrestling fan from the time you become a fan?
Yeah, so I definitely dipped in and out. When I was younger, until about the age of 8, I would watch it all the time with my dad. He would just put me on like the couch beside him when I was a kid, and I just wouldn't leave. My eyes were glued to the TV. Then I dropped out for a little bit, came in during the Attitude Era. I absolutely loved everything they were doing there. And then I think when I was about like 18 to 20, I stopped watching it, and then I started getting back into it about the time when I discovered the independents, because I was naive like everyone else. Like WWE was the only thing out there, and yada yada yada. And then I discovered, whoa, there's all these other companies doing some really, really cool stuff. And so that was maybe about 4 years ago, and then from there it's just been gung-ho, and I have not looked back.
Have you trained to wrestle, or have you always done just interviewing and stuff?
Just the interviewing. I'm a total wimp. I have no aspirations to actually get inside of the ring. I'd rather watch it and learn more about it by interviewing people.
How did you get into a wrestling company to like interview? Did you like was it a TV spot, or was it just like a indie show? If you weren't in wrestling, how did you break in?
Yeah, so I had my blog that Konnan mentioned earlier where I was interviewing musicians, and that got fairly big when I started interviewing some top names in the business. And then my dad, funny enough, was like, hey, you should start interviewing wrestlers since you like wrestling so much. So I started interviewing at a local promotion here in Toronto. I interviewed pretty much their entire roster, and all the guys kept speaking so highly of my interviews that the owner of the promotion said, hey, why don't you start doing interviews for us? So that randomly started happening, and they aired on Fight Network up here in Canada. Then once I was kind of easing out of that company, I started doing work for BCW in Windsor, Ontario, which is co-owned.
Is that
exactly.
D'Amore? Okay.
Yep. Co-owned by him, and they really liked what I was doing. He's like, hey, we're up in Canada a lot for Impact. Want to be our backstage host? And I was like, this is a great opportunity for sure. And then that led to all of the other pay-per-views and shows and promotions I've been with after that. So it was very organic. There was never necessarily a complete game plan, like, okay, I want to go from A, B, and C, and this is the way in. I never even thought of being a backstage interviewer or host for a company, but it all kind of happened very organically, just from that love of watching it. So yeah, I'm very thankful it kind of happened that way.
Well, you've seen the evolution of the product over the years. Yes. And you've seen like the evolution of the way women are presented on the show, right? Yes. How important do you consider sex appeal as part of the way you portray yourself on TV?
Honestly, not much. I mean, if you watch certain tapings I've done, even from the last 3 with MLW, like one day I'll wear a tight dress just because I'm feeling confident. The next day I'll wear something flowy and nice. And as long as you look decent, where you're not showing up like a slob on television, and as long as I'm comfortable and respected by everybody, I don't really take it much into account. It's one of those things. When I first started, I wouldn't wear makeup to shows. I'd show up for my interviews and not backstage TV stuff, but my interviews in like a band t-shirt and jeans. I wanted to be me, and I'm not someone who's overly showy. So when it comes to television, of course you step up your game. You want to make sure you look good. You are representing a brand, but at the same time, as far as sex appeal goes, it's definitely not the first thing on my mind.
But what do you think about if people is it inherently good, or is it a bad thing if people watch you because they're attracted to you?
I mean, it's a double-edged sword. Any fan, if they support you, that's awesome. And whether you're watching it because, oh, there's this attractive chick doing things, like whether it's a wrestler or whoever we're talking about here, and you're on the bandwagon, cool. If you're watching it because of the skill set, cool. Does it hurt? No. I mean, people have made careers completely just out of being bombshells or looking good. So I don't think it hurts with certain people. But at the same time, if you're just viewed for that, I mean, I'd like to think there's a lot more that's brought to the table.
That's true, and that the people, the ones that become more popular, the ones that have the range of everything. If you look at it, whether they're attractive, they come across as intelligent, they speak well. And that ultimately is where you get your marketability from, and you're doing very well at it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
What since you like the indies and all that, what wrestling do you watch when you do have time? Because there's so much of it, it's impossible to watch it all anymore.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. The main stuff that I check in to now frequently, like every week, whether I'm traveling, I'll watch it on YouTube, or if I'm home, it's on BN. MLW, like I checked it out before actually being with the company, but now that I am signed on, like that's when I always make sure I watch, because it's cool when you're backstage doing these segments. You never know how they're going to actually lay out when they're in post-production. So I get a kick out of seeing how everything comes together, which is, really nerdy, but whatever.
How they make the sausage. No, that's incredible. It is just to watch that whole process. Plus, it helps you as an interviewer too. You know what I'm saying? Right.
For sure, because you get a better grasp of the storyline. Sometimes you film stuff so out of sequence, you have no idea how stuff's actually going to unfold. Yeah. You don't know who's going to end up winning things, etc. So for me, that's super important. And then otherwise, it really depends. A lot of the time I find it's not flicking on a channel recording stuff. It's seeing clips from a lot of independent stuff in my Twitter feed. I'm like, oh, that match is happening. Cool. Like Nick Gage is going against so-and-so at Beyond. Like definitely going to check that out. So it's a lot of streaming and just kind of seeing clips and then gravitating towards that.
Yeah, that's kind of the way you have to watch a product nowadays. You find out what good match, what good promo, or something that everybody's telling you, go and you kind of watch it. It's hard to just watch a whole show completely.
There's so much of it. It's ridiculous. Like even before all of these other companies came about, just keeping up with WWE between Raw, SmackDown, NXT, and then all of the side shows they have on the network. Like it's so much wrestling, which is awesome if you're a wrestling fan. But for me, it's a lot. It's
too much. It's almost like when you go to WrestleMania. Remember, it used to be like one day. Now it's like a 4 or 5 day event.
Right. It's
ridiculous. So let me ask you a question about music